So now, how old are you now?
I'm 31 now.
You're 31 now. This started when you were 7. You were finally diagnosed at 18, was it?
19.
Okay, at 19. And then you went through how many years of treatments and how many doctors to get here now?
I went through 11 years of treatments and probably maybe eight or 9 doctors.
Okay, to get where you are now.
Right, manageable.
Okay.
Where I am today is that the disease is manageable with still some persistent symptoms that creep up.
What are you still experiencing?
Sometimes I experience joint pain, headaches, nausea, fatigue, extreme fatigue. Memory loss is a big thing for me. My memory is not great.
Yeah.
And if I'm overly tired, then the way that I speak can be a little bit, putting sentences together can be difficult for me.
Okay.
But I know that I can get through it.
How are you treated now? Like, what's the treatment?
Well, I have a toolbox now, and inside of my toolbox are an array of different items, including different doctors, different healers, different homeopathics, vitamins, essential oils, baths, recipes, juices, meditations, places I can go to relax. I mean, I have an arsenal, and I think everyone, whether or not they have Lyme disease, should have a toolbox which they can dip into anytime they need a little bit of extra support, physical, emotional, mental.
Yeah. Well, are you still on antibiotics?
No, I'm not. No antibiotics.
No medicine?
No, homeopathy. I'm now leaning towards homeopathy, vitamins, natural healing, diet, things like that.
What do you say to people who are just not getting it? Who think, oh, well, you know what, this Lyme disease thing, I mean, it's just really blown out of proportion. And what do you say to people like that?
I look at them as uneducated. Honestly, if somebody doesn't believe in Lyme disease or believe in chronic Lyme disease, or they don't think that you can get this sick from Lyme disease, and I consider them a bit uneducated or ignorant on the issue.
Now, you're 31?
Yes.
Okay, at the age that you are now,
yes.
Can you believe that this happened to you?
No. No, I can't. I look back and I think, how did I get through that? I mean, I don't know how I got through it. It's kind of a miracle. And a lot of people are suffering like I did, or more, or worse than I did. I saw a girl the other day who was in a wheelchair.
It's unbelievable.
People die from this.
Yeah.
I could have died.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because that's part of the title of the book. It almost killed you. How did it almost kill you?
Well, on several occasions, in many ways. I mean, when you go through so much physical agony and what the disease does on a physical level, it can kill you. It can stop people's hearts. Some people die from heart failure. Some people die because they can't take it anymore and they end up committing suicide. I mean, there are so many ways that this disease can kill you physically and emotionally, and it can kill your soul. You know, it really can kill your soul, and it's very, very lonely. And not a lot of people understand it, because you look fine on the outside. You know, you can look fine on the outside. One day you can go and be a part of society or be a part of a friend's birthday party, and then 6 days in a row you can't move, you can't walk, you can't talk, you can't think, you can't function. And people don't see what happens behind closed doors, therefore they assume, well, she was fine last week, so, you know, or why is she canceling again?
Right.
So it's a very confusing disease, very complicated, and it brings on a lot of illusions.
Okay, so let's go back now, because I got to tell you, your story is the most horrific story that I've ever done a news report on when it comes to Lyme disease. I mean, I just couldn't, it was shocking to me how it really just invaded your body and ravaged it. It ravaged your body and your brain.
It did. The disease spreads and multiplies and invades and hides. And when it crossed the blood-brain barrier is when it really got scary. You know, and because they didn't catch it for a very long time. So if you don't catch it, if you don't treat it, then you're in big trouble.
Right. Okay, so let's go back. You're 7 years old. Now I know it's either Bridgehampton, Nantucket, or Connecticut.
Right,
It's
we're
probably
not
one of
sure.
those three. Yeah, it's one of those three.
Yeah.
But you're 7 years old. You get bit by a tick. What happens?
My mother pulled the tick off, sent it to the town hall to get it tested. The test came back inconclusive. She said that's not good enough. She heard about a specialist, and this was in 1992. She heard about a specialist, sent it to the specialist, and the specialist said, I'm not sure. I don't know what to tell you. It's kind of borderline, but it's probably just negative. I can't help you.
So what happens from there? How
From
long
there-
after that do you start developing symptoms, and what are they?
From there, I start to develop symptoms, a lot of joint pain, muscle pain, a lot of strep throat. And my mother, the best mother she could be, was not privy to all of the symptoms that Lyme disease presents. So when I came home saying, my legs hurt, Mommy, my legs hurt, when the teachers would call and say, Ally seems really tired, and she keeps stretching her legs. Or, she's out of school a few more times than other kids this year from strep throat. She's having a lot of headaches. Even the pediatrician said, it's just growing pains. If parents are educated, because sometimes the doctors are set in their ways, but if the parents can educate themselves and say, it's not normal that my child has joint pains and muscle pains and multiple cases of strep throat and a lot of headaches and can't stay awake during class, there might be something else wrong. Well, so I went about my time in school and I zipped my lips. I kept my mouth shut because they told me it was growing pains, so I wasn't going to complain anymore.
How did it make you feel, though, when you're 7, you're 8, you're 9 years old, and you're having joint pains, severe joint pains, and you're telling people, and the response is, oh, it's just growing pains. I mean, how does that make you feel?
I felt like a weak person. I felt like somebody who wasn't strong, who was a complainer, who was being overly dramatic, because I thought, okay, if it's growing pains, then everybody must be feeling this. What I later learned is that I'm one of the strongest human beings I've ever met. So
I would have to agree with that. After reading your book, I would say you're on the money with that, everything that you went through.
Thank you.
So then, you're a child and you're having these experiences and these feelings and these symptoms, and now you get into your teenage years.
Yes.
Just, in a nutshell, if you can, what were you experiencing then?
So the joint pains persisted. They got worse. Strep throat kept coming. Nausea kept coming up. And then I got into a snowboarding accident. And the symptoms sort of really flared up after that. And the joint pain started migrating a lot more than it did. It started migrating from my knees to my hips to my ankles to my neck to my shoulders to my hands to my elbows, mostly in the knee and hip area, but on really bad days it was kind of all over. My whole body hurt. And then I stopped being able to read. My reading abilities decreased. The ability to retain information plummeted to the point where it was noticeable. And they just thought I had, a learning disability. So it was confusing. It was very confusing because I was I am a very bright person. I was a bright child, a very intelligent child. And I knew that I knew the information that I was learning, but it was not able to stick. I was not able to repeat the information that I was learning, and it became incredibly frustrating.
And then I imagine I'll tell you something when we're done shooting regarding memory, but at that point, because when you're reading the book and you know that you ended up in a psychiatric hospital,
Right.
many people are going to go, whoa, wait a minute. How does getting bit by a tick, how do you end up in a psychiatric hospital?
Right.
How does that happen?
I know.
It's frightening.
It's really scary, and it happens to a lot of people.
So if you can, in a nutshell, how does that happen?
Well, as far as I know, you know, when people who had syphilis, they ended up in psych wards. It attacks the brain. And that happened to me as well. And Lyme disease invaded my brain. I literally went crazy, had a nervous breakdown. You know, on top of other things, I had just come out with a huge TV show and had unsolicited fame from that, or unexpected fame, I should say. My parents were divorcing. You know, I lived a fast-paced life in New York City. I had a nervous breakdown along with a lot of psychiatric symptoms due to Lyme disease. And it was all at once. It was not like I had these symptoms that would come up and then go away. It was like all of a sudden I had this episode for like a month. And it really freaked my dad out. I mean, of course, he was very frightened and worried, and he got me help, which was might seem dramatic, but I think he did the right thing, because if I hadn't gone to that hospital, I would not have met the psychiatrist who ultimately saved my life, who recognized my symptoms as being Lyme disease symptoms.
And how long did it take to get to there? For somebody to finally go, oh my God, these are Lyme disease symptoms?
6 months.
No, but from the point where you were...
Oh,
yeah.
11 and a half. My dad says almost 14 years, but that doesn't make sense.
Because you were 7 and you were diagnosed at 18, so that would be 11. That would be about 11 years.
Yeah, I was actually 19 when I got diagnosed finally. So it was over 11 years. It took over 11 years for somebody to connect the dots, because there were a lot of dots, but nobody was connecting them. And she finally did.
Right. It's so wild to me, because there are so many things that were going on with you over the course of those 11 years. So many different symptoms that somebody, it just is shocking to me that it took that long for a doctor to say, whoa, let's look at all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And this is what it could be.
Well, I had doctors say, listen, you have all of these symptoms, your blood is showing something, but we're not quite sure what. You know, it might be multiple sclerosis. It's probably fibromyalgia. Maybe it could be rheumatoid arthritis. And I grabbed on to any diagnosis thrown to me because I thought, okay, I'm being validated. I'm not making these symptoms up. They are real. I knew that I was feeling them. I mean, of course I did. My parents knew I was feeling them. And they could see the tears running down my face when I was feeling them. They were real. But nobody could have a clear explanation or treatment to figure out what was going on.
Right. And then when you get the show, Rich Girls, that seemed to exacerbate the problem. Talk to me about that.
Well, you know, I was a 17-year-old. I was a producer in my teenage years. I was an actress in an off-Broadway play, and even before that in other plays, and produced a feature film, and I loved producing. I loved working. And when MTV came to me and offered me to work with them in some capacity, I thought, oh, cool, I'll produce a TV show for them. I was very naive. And, you know, I had no idea. Reality TV didn't exist. It was this new phenomenon with the Osbournes was the first show. So I thought, well, this will be kind of an experience that probably won't go anywhere. And boy, did it go somewhere. And I was a little caught off guard.
How did it exacerbate, though, your health issues?
Well, you know, stress exacerbates Lyme disease. So 6 days of shooting for 12 hours for 5 months will exhaust anybody. And I was exhausted. I was depleted. I was exhausted. I was afraid. I was confused. I was put on the spot. I was really, the Lyme disease had definitely begun way before that to invade the brain, and this TV show kind of magnified a lot of the symptoms.
Okay. When you talk about it invading your brain, give me some examples of some of the symptoms. What happens, or what have you been told happened to you during this time period?
Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. When you're talking about the Lyme disease, how it ravages the brain, basically.
Yes.
So what was happening to you when it had gotten to the brain?
Oh, Okay, like the symptoms, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, what happened to me when Lyme disease started invading my brain was I wasn't making sense. So I would say things that didn't make any sense, that I knew weren't true, but that would fly out of my mouth. Or I'd see somebody that I'd known for years and totally forget their names. I'd be driving home and forget where I was going or how to get home. It was to the point where I knew something was wrong, but I was kind of secretive about it because I was scared.
Yeah.
And there were things that happened during the breakdown where it was almost like I was downloading all of this information, that I was getting information downloaded to me, and I was just spewing it out, and it wasn't connecting. It was like the left and the right side of my brain weren't communicating. And it was kind of coming out haphazardly, like a cartoon, with all these things coming out of the person's mouth all over the place. And I wasn't able to understand how to feed myself, take a shower, make a phone call. Like, I couldn't organize my thoughts. I couldn't organize how to function. And this was in this short period of the breakdown. And I knew that something was wrong.
So this was are these symptoms are what led to the breakdown, or are these part of the breakdown?
Part of the breakdown.
Gotcha.
The symptoms leading up to the breakdown, everything between not being able to make a decision, like a simple decision, like what kind of lettuce to put in a bowl. Going to the grocery store and knowing that you're there, but not remembering what you're there for, and just sitting there and staring at the row of different canned beans and thinking, what, I don't even know what to do right now. Really simple tasks that when I'm well, I mean, it's no brainer. And when somebody that's sick is functioning, you can't function. And it's really scary, and it's very frustrating. And when you don't have answers to why you're unable to mentally function, to make a simple decision, it can become paralyzing to the point where you don't even want to do anything.
Yeah. How difficult was this for your mom and dad?
Oh gosh, being a parent now, I can't even imagine what my parents went through. I can't even imagine. I really can't. I got better for them. You know?
Let me see here. You're terrific, and I love the fact that you're so honest. You know, and not a lot of people are.
Gotta be honest. I think people are afraid of being honest because they're afraid of being judged. But if you have self-acceptance and you're able to be vulnerable and accepting of yourself, then there's really nothing to be afraid of.
Right.
And maybe being vulnerable will give other people permission to be vulnerable and honest as well, which makes for a healthier existence.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Now you're a national spokesperson for Lyme disease. You know, why do you feel that that is so important?
When I got sick, and there were times where I thought, you know, I'm never going to get better. This is a lost cause. Why is this happening to me? You know, I should just give up, whatever. There was something in the back of my mind that thought, you know, Ally, you got this disease for a reason. You were born into this family for a reason. You might as well do some good with what your experience was. So get better, get yourself better, so you can get yourself out there and help people. And that was a huge motivating factor for me to get healthy again, besides being a mother. And it's almost like a social human responsibility in the best way possible. It's like, you know what, I have this experience, I can make, as Yolanda says, lemonade out of lemons. And I think that I'm doing that with a little extra honey and mint on the side. And I think that, you know, in life, if we can find this, if I could find the silver lining in my experience, it is to use my experience to benefit others, which I hope that I'm doing, and doing due diligence to those out there who don't have a voice for what they're going through.
See, that's one of the things too, and I'm sure you've been asked this question, you know, hundreds of times. You're a lucky kid. You were born into a privileged family. People see you on TV and they see your father and he's super successful and your mom's successful and they think, oh God, her life, it must be fabulous.
It is. I do have a fabulous life. And just because my parents worked really, really, really hard and are successful doesn't mean that we're not human. I mean, everybody goes through things in life. It's what you do with it that matters.
The disease doesn't discriminate.
The disease does not care what shoes you wear, what car you drive, what color your hair is, where you live. Doesn't matter if you're tall, if you're short, if you're yellow, if you're purple, if you're Jewish, if you're Buddhist. Doesn't matter.
Right.
This disease does not discriminate. And by the way, I fall into this stereotype of a privileged white person on the East Coast getting affected with Lyme. That is so not the case for, you know, a huge percentage of the population affected with Lyme disease. We have Lyme disease in 50 states, in 80 countries. Think about all the people who work outside. I mean, even if, by the way, even if you have privilege as I did, we still couldn't find an answer for 11 years. So I'm working my tail off to get to the bottom of how to diagnose this disease properly, how to cure it if it becomes chronic, and to get people educated to prevent themselves from being bitten by in the first place. Heather Hurst has a wonderful website called Project Lyme, and it's all about prevention. If we can prevent kids or people getting bitten in the first place, then we don't have to worry about this anymore.
Right. You brought up a really good point there. I mean, the family that you grew up in, you guys had all of the resources really for the best doctors. And they still couldn't diagnose
Couldn't figure it out.
So
and it even took 11 years and multiple doctors for me to learn how to bring it to a manageable point.
Right. So then ultimately, how do you get better? Because now you're saying that after you were diagnosed, you had 9 more doctors that you had to go through.
There's no cure. One doctor doesn't have a magic pill. One doctor doesn't have a magic cure. I hope that one day we will. Everybody's experience is different. Everybody's bodies and immune systems are different. And everybody has their own path when it comes to Lyme disease. Mine was very specific, and I'm very grateful that I was even able to get through those treatments. Really wonderful doctors. Every single one of them are extraordinary doctors. Everybody has a different experience.
Yeah, what would you say to people when they're watching this, if they think they have Lyme disease and nobody's listening?
That's the hardest part.
Because that was a big part in your book. You felt like nobody was listening, like you kept saying it, saying it, and they heard your words, but they weren't listening. It wasn't sinking in that, you know what, we got to look deeper here.
I think that, you know, you have to learn, I had to learn how to be my own advocate and to be honest with myself and honest with the people around me, and you've got to fight for yourself sometimes and for your family members, and just to not give up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else at all that you want to get across that I haven't asked you about? I'm just going to check my notes here.
About Lyme disease?
Yeah, and your experience and...
The book isn't just for Lyme disease.
Well,
this is for Lyme disease. I would say this. I would say this. This is something very interesting that Dr. Shander talked about in her doctor's opinion epilogue thing. And it's that Lyme disease, the healing process is threefold. It's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual. And if you can hit those 3 levels of healing, then you're probably going to be a little bit ahead of the curve than other people, I think.
Okay. The disease, like when I'm sitting here listening to you and reading the book, it really stole your childhood.
Yeah, it really did. I was robbed of my childhood. Yeah.
So from the age of 7 until 19, and then even after you were diagnosed, I mean, what was the one thing? It starts with an H, one of those first
Herxheimer. Well, so I had a Herxheimer with every single treatment that I did, with every single doctor that I tried. A Herxheimer, a flare-up of the symptoms occurred.
Okay.
And I can maybe only count 1, maybe 2 summers in my 20s that I experienced out of bed. I had all summers in bed from being ill. I had 2 summers out of bed in my 20s.
Now that's shocking. That's hard to believe.
Yeah, I know. It's hard for me to believe too.
My God.
I was able to do certain things here and there, but for the most part I was very sick in bed.
Yeah.
I don't think the allergens and the air helped, whatever it was.
What do you say to those people, people that are watching who have Lyme disease? You know, because you look great. You do. You
Thank
look
you.
great. But what do you say to them to give them hope? Because when they're in a wheelchair or they can't get out of bed and they want to give up, what can you say?
Something that helped me throughout were doctors, family members, and especially myself, telling myself, I'm going to get better. And saying it every single day, I'm going to get better. I'm strong. I'm going to get better. And telling other people that you know who have Lyme disease, you're going to get better. I know it. You're strong. Giving yourself those affirmations and giving people around you who are sick those affirmations are some of the most helpful tools. And I write about written affirmations and intentions in my book. So it's a wonderful tool that I have in my little toolbox that has been incredibly instrumental in my healing process.